My manager looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're replaceable." Never forget that. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sound angry. It was like he was reminding me to lock up after my shift. Matter of fact. Practiced. The kind of line you only deliver when you've already decided someone's future for them. I'd been at that company for 10 years. He'd been there for 6 months. That night, after everyone went home, I walked past his office and kept going, straight down the hallway to the wing only executives and board members usually used. I had my laptop under my arm and a folder in my hand that I'd been building quietly for weeks, without really admitting to myself why. This is what led up to that walk. I ran the commercial projects team for a mid-sized construction firm. Not a tech startup, not Wall Street. Steel, concrete, schedules, budgets. We build hospitals, schools, ugly but profitable office parks. My name isn't on the logo, but my signature is underneath a lot of buildings in this city. When I started, we were 10 people in a cramped floor with coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. By the time this happened, my department alone was 36 people, and we had a whole floor with actual windows. Promotions, bonuses, late nights, early mornings. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The only reason I stayed that long was simple. The work made sense. You pour a foundation, you watch it cure, you frame, you inspect. It's measurable. Either the beam holds or it doesn't. No guessing. No spin. The people above me, though, that's where things got fuzzy. Our old regional director, Mason, was the kind of guy who remembered your kid's name and would still rip you apart if your numbers were off. Fair, but lethal. When he retired, they brought in a modern manager from another branch. Younger, shinier, with a resume full of buzzwords and an Instagram full of airport lounges. His name was Daniel Price, but everyone started calling him Dan after the second week because that's what he wanted. "Mr. Price makes me sound like a principal," he joked in the first all hands. People laughed. I watched. The first time he shook my hand, he squeezed just a little too hard and said, "So you're the one keeping this region afloat?" It sounded like a compliment until I noticed the pause, like he was measuring what that meant for him. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. New boss, new style. He sat in on meetings, asked predictable questions, threw around phrases like synergy across verticals and lean resource allocation. I translated that in my head into, we're going to ask the same 10 people to do the work of 20. He started small. I'd present our weekly progress to senior management, and he'd chime in at the end with, "And of course we've been pushing Ethan to streamline that process." As if the idea had started in his office and not in my team's stand-up 3 months earlier. He'd forward my reports to the CEO with a line like, "Here's the updated structure I've been testing with projects." I was CC'd, in case I'd missed my own work. It was annoying, sure, but not fatal. I told myself I didn't care who got credit, as long as my people were protected and the projects were profitable. That was my job, right? Keep the machine running. Let the politicians play their game upstairs. Then the overtime started. Not ours. His. Emails at 10:30 p.m. asking why a permit wasn't cleared yet when it had been stuck with the city for 3 weeks. Meeting requests dropped on our calendars at 7 a.m. Quick touch base with no agenda. Review sessions where he'd nitpick slide fonts while ignoring the fact that we'd just pulled off a miracle on a broken budget. People on my team started showing little cracks. One of my PMs, Sarah, stopped joking in the break room. My best scheduler, Luis, stayed later and later, staring at Gantt charts like they were personal attacks. I started hearing the phrase, "Dan wants this more than the client needs this." The line moved again the day he threw me under the bus in front of the CEO. We were in the big conference room, the one with the pointless glass wall that looks impressive, but just makes everyone self-conscious. We were reviewing a hospital expansion that had nearly died 3 times thanks to supply chain issues. I'd pulled every favor I had to keep it alive. The CEO, Harris, tapped his pen on the table. "Ethan, this is tight work. I'm surprised you kept this inside 5% over budget." Before I could answer, Dan leaned back, easy smile in place. We've been on him about that for months, he said. I told him if he wanted to keep the seat, he had to start thinking like an owner, not a foreman. Like he'd lit a fire under me. Like all the discipline and late nights had been because of his wisdom. I looked at him, then at Harris. I could have corrected it. I could have said, "That's not how it happened." Instead, I swallowed it. My people needed this contract. Pride doesn't pay salaries. After the meeting, he clapped me on the shoulder in the hallway. "Don't look at me like that," he said lightly. "Perception matters up there. You got the praise. That's a win." "I don't need you rewriting history for me," I replied. He smiled without warmth. "You need me more than you think." The actual "you're replaceable" talk came a week later. We'd just finished another quarterly review. Numbers solid, safety record clean, 0 lost time incidents, the kind of slide deck that should buy you a quiet month. People filtered out of the room. Dan stayed seated, scrolling his phone. "Ethan, hang back a second," he said. I waited by the table, hands on the back of a chair, feeling that low hum of exhaustion behind my eyes. He finally set the phone down and gave me the kind of look a dentist gives an x-ray. "You seem tense in there," he started. "I'm tired," I said honestly. "We've been putting out fires for 3 quarters straight." The team's stretched. "They're holding, but barely." He nodded like he cared. "I get it. But listen, you need to be careful about how that comes across. When you talk about being stretched in front of Harris, what he hears is Ethan can't scale." "That's not what I said," I replied. "That's not the point," he said, leaning back. "He doesn't have time to parse nuance. He just thinks, can I plug someone else in there who won't complain about headcount?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Is that what you're telling him?" Dan tapped the table with 2 fingers, as if he was about to say something friendly. "I'm telling you this because I like you," he said. "You do good work, but you need to understand the reality here." He let the silence drag just long enough. "You're replaceable," he said finally. "Never forget that." He watched my face like he was waiting for something to crack. Anger, fear, gratitude for the lesson, any reaction he could turn into leverage. What he got instead was a strange kind of calm. "Am I?" I asked quietly. "Everybody is," he said, "including me. That's the game. So don't make me the bad guy when I push. I'm trying to make sure you're not the one being replaced." He stood, straightened his cuffs, and smiled like we'd just finished a mentoring session. "We good?" he asked. "We're clear," I answered. On my walk back to my office, the sentence kept looping in my head, but it sounded different every time. You're replaceable as a threat. You're replaceable as a warning. You're replaceable as a test to see if I'd swallow it, like I'd swallowed everything else. Here's the thing about working around concrete and steel for a decade. You get good at seeing hairline fractures before they turn into collapses. One minute you're telling yourself it's just another stress line. The next, you're realizing the whole structure has been compromised for years. I shut my office door, sat down, and opened a folder buried under a generic name on my desktop. Q4 notes. Inside were screenshots, emails, Slack messages, revised budgets with his digital signature on changes he'd ordered verbally and never documented. Complaints from clients that had been redirected to my inbox with a note that said, "Fix this," after he'd promised them impossible timelines. I hadn't started that folder because I was planning revenge. I'd started it because I didn't trust my memory anymore. Because every time something went sideways, the story that reached the top floor was somehow that Ethan had dropped the ball, while Dan had bravely saved the day. I scrolled through it, slowly, page by page. Replaceable. If I was just a piece on his board, then I needed to stop playing defense on his game. And remember, something important. Pieces don't usually keep records. People do. I closed the folder, shut down my screen, and looked at the framed project photos on my wall. Schools, clinics, housing, places that wouldn't exist if I'd just smiled and nodded my way through every bad decision someone above me made. The thought came slowly, then all at once. If I was replaceable to him, maybe he was just as replaceable to the people he'd been using my work to impress. That was the moment the calm snapped into something sharper. I picked up my laptop, grabbed the printed copies I'd started stashing in a locked drawer, just in case, and walked out of my office, past the break room, past his glass-walled corner, down the quiet hallway toward the frosted doors that led to the executive wing. By the time I reached them, my hands weren't shaking anymore. By the next morning, something in the office felt different. Not louder, not hostile. Just off. The way a building sounds after someone's moved a load-bearing wall without telling you. People were polite, but too polite. Conversations stopped a beat too quickly when I walked by. And Price, Dan, was suddenly everywhere. He passed my desk 3 times before noon. No reason, no clipboard, no questions. Just a glance at my monitor, a hum under his breath, and the kind of smile a dentist gives before saying, "You might feel some pressure." At 1:10 p.m., he appeared in my doorway. "You free?" he asked. No greeting, no context. I stood. "What's going on?" He didn't answer, just motioned with 2 fingers and led me down the hall. Like a dog, he expected to heel behind him. We stopped in the small conference room, the one people avoided because the AC never worked, and the window showed nothing but a brick wall. He closed the door gently. "I've been thinking about yesterday," he said, pacing slowly. "About your, reaction." "I didn't react," I said. "That's what concerns me." He tapped the chair with a knuckle. "Sit." I didn't. He exhaled through his nose, disappointed in the way only people who love power can be disappointed. "I'm trying to help you, Ethan," he said. "But if you can't show that you're willing to grow—" "Grow into what?" I asked. His smile was thin. "Into someone the board sees as future leadership material. Right now, they're not impressed." I crossed my arms. "The board hasn't seen my work. Only the summaries you give them. That's how leadership works," he shrugged. "They trust me to interpret." Interpret. That word landed like a steel beam. He watched me, weighing whether to push further. "Look," he said, softening his voice, "let's call this a performance checkpoint. I'll be doing a deeper assessment of your department over the next few weeks. Nothing dramatic, just making sure we're aligned." "An assessment," I repeated. "Standard procedure," he said. "I'll need access to your internal reports, your project notes, your team's logs. My team already sends everything to me." "Exactly," he replied, as if that proved his point. "And I need to see it all. Raw, no edits." My jaw clenched. "Since when?" "Since now." I tried to read the angle. "Are you setting me up for something?" He blinked once, slowly. "I don't set people up, Ethan. I give them rope. What they do with it is their choice." He left the room with the same casual stride he'd entered with. But when the door clicked shut, the irritation finally settled in my chest like wet sand. That was the beginning of his campaign. 2 hours later, he forwarded the CFO a thread about our cost overruns on the Westbridge job, but cut out the part where he'd personally slashed the materials budget to force innovation. I only saw it because the CFO CC'd me with a note. "Can you address this?" Then came the rescheduled client meeting I hadn't been told about. Then a sudden request for a progress snapshot of a project that wasn't due for another week. Then a Slack message at 7:42 p.m. "Need updated risk projections before tomorrow's exec call." He wasn't testing my limits. He was documenting a narrative. I'd seen it before in other companies. Star employee, political threat, remove quietly. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, one of my senior PMs, Sarah, stepped into my office, pale and tight-lipped. "Dan asked me to send him all my reports directly," she said. "Said it's a temporary reorg." I stared at her. "Did he explain why?" "No," she swallowed. "He asked if I felt supported by leadership. Then he asked some weird questions. Like whether I thought your management style was rigid, and whether I'd ever felt you were slow to adapt." I froze. "And what did you say?" I said, "You're the reason our team hasn't fallen apart." Her jaw tightened. He didn't like that. When she left, I sat back in my chair, heart thudding in a slow, heavy rhythm. He wasn't trying to assess performance. He was gathering witness statements. That night, long after everyone had gone home, I stayed. The office lights hummed softly overhead. I opened my private folder again, not the one on my desktop, but the encrypted backup I'd been keeping off-network. Emails, directives, budget alterations he'd told me to make verbally, then denied. Instances where he'd instructed me to bypass safety protocols to impress the board with margins. Complaints sent to him that he'd forwarded to me with, "Handle this quietly." As I scrolled, my irritation sharpened into something cleaner, more defined. He thought he was writing a story about me. He didn't realize I already had the whole book on him, but I didn't know it yet. His biggest mistake was still coming. The next morning, he called a surprise department meeting. Everyone shuffled into the main room. Dan stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand, posture relaxed, like he was about to explain a new office coffee policy. "We're restructuring," he announced. Heads lifted. Chairs creaked. People exchanged looks. "To maximize efficiency," he continued, "I'm temporarily removing Ethan from direct oversight of project approvals. For now, those will route through me." Silence. My team looked at me, some confused, some scared, some angry. I didn't move. Dan smiled, tapping the marker against the board. "This is a positive shift, less bottlenecking, more synergy. Everyone wins." He believed that. He believed every word he was saying. He believed he'd already won, but he didn't see what I saw. The tiny hairline crack that meant the structure was failing on his side, not mine. When the meeting ended, he lingered behind, waiting for everyone to leave. When we were alone, he lowered his voice. "You should take a couple days off," he said. "Clear your head. Come back with a better attitude." There it was, the setup. The moment he would later twist into, "Ethan was unstable and needed time away." I nodded once, then walked out without a word. Not in defeat, in preparation. Because while he spent the morning celebrating his little power play, I spent mine quietly printing, backing up, time-stamping, and organizing every piece of evidence he'd ever handed me with his arrogance. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. He just didn't know for whom yet. By the time Friday rolled around, Dan had convinced himself he'd already cleared the board. He walked through the office with the breezy confidence of a man who thinks he's untouchable, nodding at people who barely nodded back. He didn't notice the shift. Or maybe he did, but assumed it meant they feared him. Power makes some men deaf. Around noon, my inbox lit up with a forwarded email chain he'd cherry-picked for the CEO. Missing from his version, instructions he'd given me verbally, deadlines he'd moved without telling the client, and the part where he'd overridden a safety inspection to keep momentum. I read the thread twice. Then I printed it, the full original with metadata, and added it to the growing stack in my bag. It didn't matter what he filed upstairs. I was building downstairs. After lunch, he called me into his office. Not a meeting request, a barked order across the floor. "Ethan, now." I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. He didn't offer a seat. "You skipped yesterday's sync," he said, flipping through a folder for show. "I'm marking that formally." "I didn't skip it," I replied. "It wasn't on my calendar." "It's been on the shared calendar for months." "It wasn't on mine," he smirked. "Then you need to manage your tools better. That's not on me." He slid a sheet across the desk, a preliminary performance concern notice. My name at the top. Vague language. No specifics. "You're moving in the wrong direction," he said, "and I can't protect you if you won't help yourself." There it was, the fake lifeline, the threat wrapped as mentorship. I didn't touch the paper. "You want me out?" I said calmly. "Just say it." His lips twitched. "I want someone who isn't afraid of accountability. If that isn't you, then yes, we'll find someone else." I nodded once. "Understood." Something in my tone finally got his attention. That's it? He asked. That's it. He leaned back, studying me. You look different. Clarity will do that, I said. He waved a dismissive hand. Take the weekend, cool off. Monday we'll revisit. But that decision would cost him everything. I walked out without the notice. HR could collect it from his desk later. By the time he realized I hadn't signed it, he'd have bigger problems to solve. That evening, when the office emptied, I stayed behind again. My computer screen glowed blue in the dim, quiet floor. Outside the windows, the city hummed with the end-of-week rush. People heading to dinners, bars, their normal lives. My life had narrowed to a countdown. I opened the folder. Doctored budgets, bypassed safety approvals, private Slack messages instructing me to massage numbers, time-stamped proof he'd altered dates on project logs, client complaints he'd reassigned to me with fix it or bury it. And the worst one, an email chain where he explicitly ordered me to ignore a subcontractor's warning about a structural load issue, one that could have hurt people if I hadn't overridden him quietly. I breathed slowly. Even seeing it laid out didn't make it feel real. Then I added the newest set, the altered email chain, the bogus performance note, and meeting records showing his sudden reassignment of approvals. The pattern was unmistakable. But the real turning point happened when I clicked into the internal HR portal to download old reviews, just in case. A message popped up I wasn't expecting. Board member access flagged. Contact required. At first, I thought it was an error. Then I realized something. Months earlier, during a major hospital project, I'd been given temporary board-level file access to upload technical documentation. The permission had never been revoked, meaning I could request a direct session with the Oversight Committee, meaning I didn't have to go through Dan, or HR, or anyone under his influence. For the first time in weeks, my breathing steadied. I drafted a request, clean, professional, no emotion, just facts, concerns about compliance violations, documentation ready for review, request for a private meeting, urgency, high due to operational risk. I hit send. The system didn't ask for approval. Instead, it gave me a time. Monday, 8 a.m. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. When I shut down my computer and walked to the elevator, I felt a weight lift. Not relief, not victory. Something colder, like the moment before concrete sets. Irreversible. On Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. Jenna, one of the senior architects, texted me. He's asking questions about you. Weird ones. Be careful. I typed back. Thank you. No more details. The fewer people pulled into this, the better. I wasn't dragging anyone down with me. That afternoon, Dan called. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. I didn't listen. He texted next. We need to talk before Monday. Call me. I didn't. Around 6 p.m., he tried again. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I put my phone face down. Sunday evening, I reviewed everything one last time. Every document, every timestamp, every message. I organized it into labeled sections, cross-referenced, clean. No emotion, no commentary, just evidence. And then I added the final piece, a summary timeline that clearly showed how every mistake he'd accused me of was directly connected to his own undocumented decisions. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I ironed a shirt, set 2 alarms, and went to bed early, because in 10 hours I'd walk into a room where he couldn't talk over me, couldn't twist my words, couldn't raise his voice or shift the blame. A room where the only thing that mattered was proof. And I had more than enough. I arrived at the building before sunrise. The lobby lights were still dim, the hallways quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every footstep feel like a decision. I rode the elevator to the top floor, a place I'd only visited twice in my entire career. Both times as a background character, there to present data while others made choices above my pay grade. Not today. At 7:58, the assistant outside the boardroom opened the door. They're ready for you. The room was colder than I remembered. Winter air conditioning, glass walls, long mahogany table, 9 seats filled. Faces I'd seen on annual reports and holiday cards. People who controlled budgets larger than small towns. Harris, the CEO, nodded politely. "Ethan, sit." I did. No handshake, no small talk. Good. I didn't need courtesy. I needed clarity. He steepled his fingers. "You requested this meeting. High urgency. Compliance related. We want to hear your concerns." I placed the folder on the table. Not dramatic, just final. "I need to show you what's been happening in our region under Director Price." No one flinched at the name. That meant they weren't surprised by the possibility, only curious about the details. I opened the folder, one section at a time. Altered budgets. Messages where he ordered me to bypass safety steps. Screenshots of him adjusting timestamps on logs. Memos where he credited himself for my team's crisis recoveries, while privately ordering decisions that created those crises in the first place. I didn't embellish, I didn't comment, I didn't speculate. I presented. For the first 10 minutes, the board listened politely. By minute 20, the politeness was gone. By minute 30, the room had shifted entirely. Harris finally held up a hand. "Stop." I froze. He wasn't angry at me. That was the strange part. His anger was directed lower on the org chart. "Mr. Price reported the Westbridge issue as your oversight," he said. "Are you telling us those changes were his?" I slid another document across the table. His signature, his wording, his approval. Silence. Then the CFO spoke. "We flagged irregularities in his financials last quarter," she said slowly. "He explained them as growth pains." "And he blamed his team," added another board member. Their voices overlapped, growing sharper. That's when the door opened. Dan walked in, not confidently, not lazily, sickly pale, tie crooked, eyes darting. He looked like someone who'd been told to be here, but not why. "Good morning," he said, trying to smile. Sit," Harris ordered. Dan's smile twitched, faded. He sat across from me. His eyes flicked to the folder, then to my face. Then he understood, fully. "What's this?" he asked the room, not me. "Why wasn't I briefed?" "Nobody's here to discuss your comfort," the CFO said. I watched him swallow, watched his jaw shift, watched the moment he realized the hierarchy he'd weaponized no longer protected him. He tried the first tactic, indignation. "This is absurd," he said. "If Ethan provided anything, it's taken out of context. He's been unstable for weeks. I've had to." "Ethan requested a compliance review," Harris interrupted. "He brought evidence. You will not speak again until you're asked to." Dan froze. That was my micro-catharsis. Right there. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just the quiet click of a trap closing exactly where it belonged. The board questioned me for 40 minutes. Dates, protocols, processes. I answered cleanly, precisely, like I'd been rehearsing for months, because in a way, I had. When they dismissed me, Harris stood. "Leave your contacts available," he said. "We'll be conducting a full investigation immediately." I nodded. No victory smile. No vindictive look toward Dan. He wasn't a threat anymore. He was paperwork. I stepped into the hallway. The assistant closed the boardroom door behind me, and for the first time in a long time, my shoulders weren't tense. My phone buzzed once. A single message from HR. "Please be available at 2 p.m. for an update." I walked outside into the cold morning and let the air hit my lungs. I didn't go back to my office. There was no point. I found a cafe across the street and sat by the window with a coffee that tasted like relief. Around 1:50 p.m., HR called. "Ethan," the director said, "the board has concluded their preliminary review." I waited. Effective immediately, Director Price has been placed on administrative leave pending termination proceedings. A slow exhale left my chest. "And," she added, "the board has expressed interest in offering you interim leadership of the region while they evaluate long-term restructuring." "Thank you," I said simply. I appreciate the offer. Because here was the truth. I didn't want his job. I didn't want to inherit his shadow, his politics, the mess he'd left behind like oil on water. I wanted something clean. 2 days later, I got it. A competitor, one that had tried to poach me twice before, reached out after word quietly spread through professional circles. Your work speaks for itself, their VP told me. We can offer you a director role, full autonomy, no babysitting diluted egos. You'd build things that matter, not manage someone else's insecurities. I accepted before my old company even finished drafting the internal announcement. My last day was quiet. I packed my office in under an hour. A few people hugged me. Some shook my hand. Some whispered, "Thank you." A couple just looked relieved. Dan's reign had bruised more people than I knew. When I walked out into the parking lot with my box, HR stopped me. "The board asked me to give you this," she said. A letter. Not flowery, not emotional, just simple acknowledgement. Your integrity protected this company from significant risk. We thank you. I folded it once and put it in my jacket. On my drive home, the sky was clear, the roads empty, the radio low. For the first time in years, my thoughts didn't spin. No fear of emails, no imaginary arguments, no pressure waiting for me on Monday. Just peace. Real, unnegotiated peace. At home, I set the letter on the counter, made myself a dinner that didn't involve reheating leftovers, and sat at my own table like a man who could finally breathe without permission. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. It's quiet. It's calm. It's the absence of someone who thought they could define your worth. Dan once told me I was replaceable. He was right, just not in the way he meant. He got replaced. I got restored. And there's nothing louder than a man walking away from a battlefield he never wanted, knowing he didn't lose. He simply chose a better war,